and welcome to Imagine This Stories. When you think about Italy, what is the first thing that pops into your head? Pizza? Pasta? Meatballs? Maybe cappuccino or gelato? Clearly, my mind is on food today. Well, today we're going to hear about a trip the Apostle Paul took from Caesarea to Italy. And let me tell you, it was no pleasure cruise. So sit back, relax, kick off your shoes. And for the next few minutes, imagine this. The Apostle Paul was in trouble. He had been arrested for telling people that Jesus was the Son of God. He was told to stop a lot of times, but he didn't. He wanted people to know the truth, that God sent his son Jesus to earth to die for all the people, and that Jesus rose again. And while a lot of people did listen and believe, a lot did not want to hear it. So much so that they made up lies about Paul. Jewish leaders accused him of some serious crimes after his arrest in Jerusalem. They said he tore up the temple and created riots. So now Paul is a prisoner on a ship that is sailing for Rome, Italy. You see, Paul was a Roman citizen, and Caesar was the emperor of Rome. So Paul was being taken to see Caesar to see what he would say. Now, if that were me, I might have been pretty scared. But God told Paul a while ago that Paul would be telling people in Rome about Jesus. And now, here he was on a ship headed to Rome. Clearly, none of this was a surprise to God. The man in charge of Paul on this trip was a Roman officer named Julius. He was the captain of an imperial regiment, and it seems he was also a pretty nice guy. When they stopped the ship in the town of Sidon, today we call that area Lebanon, he let Paul get off the ship and see Christian friends who lived there. Now, I'm sure Paul had guards with him, but I'm also sure Paul was very glad to see people he knew. They probably gave him food and took care of him for a little bit. He had been a prisoner for 2 years now and probably missed seeing his friends. The ship left Sidon and kept sailing for Rome. Paul told the man in charge of the prisoners that there was a storm coming and it would be a bad one. The ship might crash and people could get hurt or even die. This captain was like, "What do you know about sailing? Be quiet. The captain of the ship says we're okay, so we're going." They should have listened to Paul. While the weather was good for a day or so, before long, the wind started to pick up. Then lightning and rain and big waves. There was nothing the captain of the ship could do but sail along with the storm. I have to imagine that was pretty scary. The Bible says that the sailors started trying to tie the ship together with ropes, and that they were so afraid they might hit something in shallow water they threw an anchor out and stayed in one place, letting the storm hit them over and over again. After a day or so, they started throwing things overboard, cargo to make the ship lighter. At first, they probably threw over some of the more expensive things they were carrying, like wine and olive oil. Then they probably threw over extra sails and ropes and sailing equipment. Finally, they threw over the grain they were carrying to Rome. They must have been really scared. The grain was worth a lot of money, so they must have really thought the ship was going to sink if they were going to throw all of that over the edge and into the ocean. The storm raged for many days. No one had eaten for a long time. Finally, Paul called the crew together and said, "Guys, you should have listened to me in the first place. We could have avoided all this damage and loss. But it's okay. Be brave. None of you are going to die, even though the ship will go down." Wait, what? For last night, an angel of God came to me, and he stood behind me and said, "Don't be afraid, Paul. I can guarantee you will stand trial before Caesar. What's more, God in his goodness has granted safety for you and everyone sailing with you. So be encouraged, for I believe God, just as he said. Oh, and we will be shipwrecked on an island." Yikes! So the angel told them, "Don't be afraid. You're not going to die, but the ship will fall apart and you'll be shipwrecked on an island." I'm really glad God is in control. Around midnight, on the 14th night of this storm, as they were being driven across the sea, the sailors thought, "Hey, land is near." So they dropped a rope over the edge with a heavy weight on the end. They measured how deep the water was, 120 feet. But a little later, when they measured again, it was only 90 feet. They started getting afraid that they would crash into rocks by the shore. So they threw out 4 more anchors, and they prayed for daylight. While they were waiting for the sun to rise, they decided maybe it would be a good idea to drop the lifeboats in the water and try to make it to land by ourselves. Paul looked at them and was like, that is not a good idea. You will die if you sail away from this ship. So the soldiers decided to trust him. They cut the ropes and let the lifeboats drift away. Just as the sun was starting to rise, Paul urged everyone to eat. You've been so worried that you haven't touched food for 2 weeks, he said. Please eat something now for your own good. I promise you, not a hair on your heads will perish. Then he took some bread and thanked God for the bread. He broke off a piece and ate it. Everyone was encouraged by this, and they all began to eat, all 276 of them. When the sun finally rose high enough that they could look around, they saw a beach, but they didn't know what beach it was. They thought, I bet we could sail this boat right onto that beach. So they cut off the anchors and left them in the sea. Then they lowered the rudders, raised the foresail, and headed toward shore. Unfortunately, the ship got stuck, and the waves smashed against the boat over and over again. It started to break apart. Ah! Some of the soldiers thought it would be a good idea if they killed all the prisoners. They didn't want them to escape. But the commanding officer said, No, we want Paul to live. We're not going to do that. Instead, everyone jump overboard and swim for the beach. The men who could not swim held on to planks or floating wood from the broken ship, and everyone escaped safely to shore. Wow, that's an amazing story, and it really happened. You can read about it in the Bible in the book of Acts, chapters 27 and 28. You want to hear something else cool? That hurricane that blew the ship around lasted 2 weeks straight. It would be like being on a roller coaster for 2 whole weeks and it never stopped. No thank you. But thank you so much for listening today, and I hope you enjoyed today's story. I look forward to talking to you again soon as we imagine this. Bye!